Howdy, and welcome to episode 122 of In the Rabbit Hole's Urban Survival Podcast. In this episode, we're joined by author Glen Tate of the 299 Day series. He's going to teach us how to pick up chicks after the apocalypse, dealing with reluctant spouses, slapping people out of normalcy bias, and all things relating to the coming collapse of the United States. We're your hosts, Aaron
and Jason.
And you are in the rabbit hole, safe and sound. Glen, welcome to the show, man.
Well, thank you for having me. This is great.
We're very excited. We get to have the author of the very popular 299 Days series on the show.
Yeah, no, and this is kind of a big show to be on, so this is cool. And very, very glad to be here and talk to your many, many listeners. Very nice.
Well, thanks, man. Those are great words.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So let's dive into, a little bit about you and what inspired you to write 10 books, man. I mean, that's a lot of writing.
Yeah, a little about me. I'm not terribly interesting in real life, to be very honest. I know that's like a big downer, right? Everyone wants to hear that, I was like on SEAL Team 6 or something, but no, pretty boring. And just a regular guy. But I think that's why the series has been so popular, because people can relate to me. I'm so normal and like other people. And also, I don't have any crazed ego, you know what I mean? And I'm not trying to make people think that I'm some super action hero guy, because that's just not my personality. No, it'd be fun. But you know what? There are a lot of books out there, a lot of series and everything that's how it is. And that's cool. And that's just not my style. And if other writers want to do that, that's cool. Just a normal guy, live in Olympia, Washington, a lawyer, a lobbyist. Don't worry, for good causes. I know the word lobbyist is not really a popular term, and that's basically it. Sat down, had an idea, kept writing and writing and writing. Basically couldn't stop, which, normally that's a bad personality trait when you can't stop with something. But in this case, it was pretty good. And sat down, wrote 10 books. Never written fiction before. That's one of the things. It's funny. The first time I said that, the phone rang, and it was the publisher, and he said, "We do not get on big podcasts and tell people that we've never written fiction before. That's a really terrible idea." And I said, "You actually have a point there." But now that the series has been so popular, I really don't care anymore what people think about that, because it obviously worked out. And so I sat down and put some thoughts down, got 10 books together. It was 3,600 pages. And then I contacted a publisher. You see, the way it normally works is people do one book and then try to keep going or something like that, instead of putting all that effort into it and then seeing if it'd be published. And I expected to self-publish it. It's a funny side story, but this is, reality is better than made up stuff. There was a $1,500 used pickup truck that I really wanted to get. And I thought, well, maybe I'll self-publish this, and a couple hundred people will mistakenly hit the buy it now button. You know what I mean? Like maybe there's an earthquake and they fell over and they hit a button or something that, buy it now. So maybe, that'll happen or something like that. So that was my high goals. Sent it to one publisher, Prepper Press, great publishing company, by the way. They said, it got back to me, read it, not all of it. It's too hard to read all of it in one sitting, and said, "Do you want a 10-book deal?" And I said, "Seriously? Are you kidding me? What?" And so going on about that, I mean, I'm drifting a little bit from your question, but that's basically it. Regular guy stuff, a lot of realism, the team, all real. People are always amazed by Pal, the 6-foot Korean gunfighter who sells insurance. They're like, "Surely you made that up. You must be a creative genius." I'm like, "I'm not a creative genius. He's one of my best friends, and he's exactly like in the book." And I realized I met all these amazing people throughout my life, and you don't really realize it until you're sitting down and you're writing a book with 300 named characters, and then you see how they all connect and cross over. And I realized that there were all these just fascinating people, Special Forces Ted, Chip. I mean, all these people, and wove them together in ways I think they would really do things. And so anyway, it's very, very real. And you can tell from reading it, it's not a cookie cutter template. It doesn't, in some ways, I mean, it reads like a novel because that's the story and how it's told, but it's not the cliche stuff. So yeah, there you have it. A regular guy who sat down and wrote a bunch of stuff, had no idea anyone would ever read it. I'm dead serious about that. Book 1 is 97% real, and there are things in there, I'll be very candid, probably wouldn't have put in if I thought anybody other than those people who like hit the buy it now button when there was an earthquake and their finger fell onto the mouse thing would have bought it. But hey, I'm happy it's out there because it's people can relate to it and it communicates a lot, and that's a good thing.
It's amazing how much I was reading, and I didn't even know that some of this was based off of kind of real life experience. I was shooting Aaron messages at 1:00 in the morning. I'm like, dude, this is way too coincidental. I was like, is he like, the next like prepper prophet or something?
The prepper oracle.
It was just amazing. I mean, I grew up kind of, real rough as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I was still here in the city, but I basically got raised by Cajuns. And I know if you're from Seattle, you have no idea what that means. Country people. And
they talk funny.
Yes.
French funny.
Yes, very French funny.
I can't understand him half the time. And I've known him for 20 years.
So it was funny kind of making those connections of those parallels. And then the whole moving off to Olympia and the whole college thing and getting away from that and becoming like the suburbanite. And when we were about, I would say about 30? About
30
years ago?
Well, but yeah, I think 28.
Yeah.
Late 20s, yeah.
All of a sudden, Aaron and all the guys wanted to start doing all this like prepper survivalist stuff. And I'm just like, you guys didn't grow up doing this stuff? I was like, cool, I need a refresher course. And we all kind of like just jumped in. And it's so funny about like, the guys that you're meeting and the gun store guys, because we got a gun store guy too. It's just funny how we've got similar characters in our own lives.
Yeah, and I think definitely the story is really, I found it very approachable in the sense that it's those same lines of you start off prepping, and I was raised around guns, but it never went shooting very often or anything like that. So it was like the first time I went to a gun store, I took myself to a gun store, and it was this very kind of weird, surreal experience. Like, oh my God, I'm about to buy my own gun. And those connections that you make with the gun store guys, those where you find the hidden little gems of survival goodness, like the dollar store story you were talking about in the book. And I think where I'm trying to go with it is that beginning prepper story of getting into it and getting acclimated to it and hiding it from certain people and all those other things.
Yeah, and thinking you're a weirdo and wondering why people think you're a weirdo when, you don't think you're a weirdo.
Yeah, and looking at them going, how do you
see
not
how
see
articulate I am?
To really kick it off, what do you want? I mean, it's 10 books. That's a big message to put out there. What is the big takeaway that you want people to have from the series?
Get ready and to not be afraid of, realizing that that's something you need to do. Community is an absolutely huge part of this message. These people that think they can do this on their own, I really feel sorry for them, because in the springtime, when the thaw comes, they'll be thawed out and stuff because they won't make it through the winter. I mean, it's, that whole lone wolf thing is just, it's sad. I mean, it's not going to work. And I think a lot of people are going to get killed because they're stupid and they think they can do that. On the community part, though, is really big. The hopefulness part, the name of the series, 299 Days, is a hopeful thing. The bad period only lasts 299 days from the day of the collapse to the inaugural ball. Of course, things don't get easy and nice after the inauguration of a new governor of a new state, but still, it is a relatively short period, and that's another thing is partial collapse and not zombies and cannibalism and crazy kind of unrealistic stuff. But that's another message, by the way, is that don't think of these things as like gigantic, like I say, zombies and cannibal stuff, because that's so unrealistic that your mind is going to have a hard time thinking that can really happen, as it properly should. I mean, if you are every time you go around a corner expecting to see a zombie, you might seek some professional help because, there is not a zombie around the corner.
Unless it's code word for liberal.
Yeah. There is that. So, yeah, it's hard to say like one message. There are multiple ones that are layered. And as you said, with 10 books, you have a lot of opportunity to have many messages. Yeah, there you go.
That makes perfect sense. And I think that was one of the big pleasant surprises that I got out of your book was the focus of community, because that's always been one of our big messages here, is that survival is broken into 3 parts, and it always starts with community. And it is a piece that is so often left out and poo-pooed upon and pushed to the side by most prepper fan fiction, is the importance. And most of it is that very one man against the world saves everything. And so
that does not work. Our farm's a good example of that.
Yeah, and yes, and it's one man against all the rabbits. But that inclusiveness and the amount of detail you go into about what it takes to build, maintain, and organize a community, and the construction of those communities.
Yeah, and all the different people, not just numerically, but all the different skill sets that are required, because it's true, there is a wide array of skill sets that are required. And then how people get along, or in some cases don't get along. That's one of the things. I mean, I am innately political, and I know that sounds terrible. People go, oh my God, politician. They think of like the guy running for class president in high school or something. I don't mean that kind of retail politics. I mean, I sort of think in ways, political ways, about persuading people, and how do you get people pulling in the same direction, and how do you resolve disputes and all these other things. And that's one of the things that's really been left out of a lot of prepper fiction. You might have descriptions of some communities. They're usually smaller communities than the one I described, but still it's just people, either getting along or not getting along, sort of black or white, on or off. And what I talk about a lot is, and you don't even notice it until you kind of step back and you realize you just learned a lot, right? I hope that's the case. The gray areas and people sort of being on the same page, but maybe they're not. And what would it take to persuade people to be on the same page, that the Patriot way, as I call it in the books, and not just walking up to somebody who's an undecided and who just wants to survive and just wants their kids to be safe and fed, and start talking to them about the Federalist Papers and what Thomas Jefferson said this one time in 1803. Nobody gives a crap, especially in those kinds of conditions. So how do you, get people over on your side to help pull guard duty with you, and those sorts of very practical things? But when you get down to it, it's political, kind of with a small p instead of the bad, big P politics. Big P. Sorry. Anyway. And that's some of the practical stuff that's in there. There are plenty of things out there. A lot of great podcasts, for example, where you can learn, how many drops of bleach to put in a gallon of water to treat, and that's all cool, and you need to know that, and that's good. And there's plenty of that in these books, but a lot of it is learning about things that maybe you never thought you needed to learn about. And so not only is the issue identified for you, but some ideas about how to resolve it are there too. And then that's especially true, as you guys were saying, about the community aspect of this, because no other book gets into it like this. And you sit there, and hopefully this is the case, you're reading stories about all these interesting people and how they're either getting along or not getting along. And then that's when I say you kind of step back and you go, wow, I just learned how to run a town hall meeting and shut down a jackwagon. That's coming up in a couple books 4 and 5. But anyway, there you go. Yeah, I'm very happy with how it all turned out. Totally unexpected.
Yeah, it's neat. And I think the other aspect of it I really enjoyed was there's definitely a lot of cool, fun, tactical stories in there. And you definitely spend a lot of time talking about the preparations outside of weapons and outside of that, as far as ensuring that there is enough food for your family to eat, and even the medical concerns and the how to go about getting antibiotics and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's funny. Just yesterday, here's a great example of that. Talking to one of the team guys, and he was really excited. And he goes, "Oh man, I got this new suppressor," and he was going on. And I go, "Man, I'm excited too. I just got 300 rolls of toilet paper." See, that's me. I'm the boring guy. I'm like the supply. I'm the nerdy law guy.
Aaron,
you need guys like that, and and it's symbiotic, because when you got guys that are the suppressor guys, and the real guys on the team are mind-blowingly good tactically. It's amazing. Complete civilians, no pretense of being trained, but I mean, we have trained, but I mean, just really, really good. And so then that gives me the ability, and I can handle myself in the range and elsewhere. But it's mainly that blending of skills. And so, yeah, it's fun. And see, nobody's going to write books probably, except maybe me, but about one of the characters is like, yeah, dude, I got 300 rolls of toilet paper. Right on. I mean, that doesn't fit the stereotype.
We've had that conversation. You have no idea.
Because I'll tell you something, that TP is going to be quite the commodity. And I put up something else. It was on the Facebook page and also on the web page, and it was a post entitled, "My name is Glen Tate and I buy tampons." No, it's exactly right. And I said, hey, guys, if you have ladies on your crew, let's figure this out. I know you have like 7 ARs and all that other stuff. You're going to need this, and went through some stuff. And because I don't really know about this topic because, I'm a guy, but some female friends of mine advised me. It was weird calling them up. I mean, some people I know pretty well, but not super well, and asking about this topic. I had to preface it by saying, okay, I'm not weird. I'm not trying to pry. Here's why I need to know some answers, like how much stuff do I need and all this other stuff. And yeah, that's you got to think of things like that. And you also, maybe wouldn't think about it just on your own if you're a typical guy. And so it really helps to have somebody bring it up. And that topic makes a brief appearance in the books in the mid part of the series. So yeah, that unconventional, but I think highly realistic prepper portrayal is what's needed, because as you guys know, we don't need any more of this doomsday prepper stereotypical, the narrative as I call it. We don't need any more of that, and it's not terribly effective. It's that narrative getting out there that there are a bunch of crazy people hiding in bunkers who are convinced that, as I say, there's a zombie around every corner. It's not persuasive. You can tell I'm a political guy, right? It is not persuasive. You are not getting people over to your side. And the more people that know about this topic and are getting prepared, the more people, not to sound dramatic, the more people are going to live. Mm-hmm. Let's be brutally honest. I can't say that about any other topic. I don't sit there and I go, hey, the kind of oatmeal I had for breakfast this morning, if more people ate that oatmeal that I just ate, more people are going to live. You just can't say that about many things. And so that realism is getting people into the fold. One of the greatest honors really about this entire unexpected book experience been the emails I get where it's usually guys say, I read your stuff and thank you and it was great. I gave this book or audiobook to my wife and she was very skeptical, and now she's totally on board, and we're going to make it in what's coming, and our marriage is better. I mean, what a tremendous honor. So it's that realism that is persuasive, and that's really what I wanted to do with this whole thing, and it's turned out a lot better than I thought it would.
Awesome, man. That is, anything that leads people down a good path of preparedness is awesome. And I mean, that's an amazing testament to the books you wrote, that people are able to share them with others and get people into preparedness and be okay with the concept, especially women, and this is not dogging women in any way, but I mean, the community is sorely lacking in the feminine department. I do, just to backstep for a second, I definitely understand the awkwardness of going to Costco and buying a pallet of tampons and such.
Funny story about that, though, because I hope I'm not interrupting you.
No, go ahead.
This is funny. This is great because I'm a guy, and of course I'm a guy, so guys will appreciate this. So I go to, it was actually Walmart, and I have like one and a half shopping carts full of tampons and pads and all this other stuff that I didn't even know existed really. And all this stuff. And there's this really cute checker. And she looks at me and she goes, "Oh, you are so thoughtful. You care about the ladies in your life." And I said, "I am super thoughtful." You're pretty. No, I didn't say that last part. But, so guys, if you want to get chicks, buy tons of tampons. Now I'm speaking a language they understand. See?
Exactly. And it's always funny. That is so often the answers to life's quandaries are to do the opposite of whatever you think is the right thing to do.
Right.
But that's too funny. And the book also raises an interesting thing that I think a lot of preppers, both men and women that are into it, but obviously, I mean, the community is made up more of men than women, but a lot of people run into the issue of a reluctant spouse, and that's brought up in the series. What do you find, both from the series and just in your own personal life, as far as easing somebody else, or in some cases not easing somebody else and just throwing them into it, what have you found to be the most effective way of getting a spouse on board or okay with it?
Yeah. And this is a super important topic because this problem is far more prevalent than people think or will admit. You get a lot of tough guys. And I keep saying guys and reluctant women, and there is a fair number of the other way around. I mean, one of my good friends is a female prepper, and her husband is totally not into it, and so it does happen. But the best way to win them over, one word that springs to mind is credibility. If you say that whole thing about zombies around the corner, you're going to have no credibility. And you need to realize, again, this is like political. This is like an elected leader needs to have credibility and all these other things. You got to realize, guys, and I'll say guys, if you overstate stuff, or if you freak out, or if you make a really bad prediction, you pretty much only have one of those. And so you need to, when in doubt, not talk. No, don't make a prediction. If you see something about the ruble devaluated 30% in 48 hours last week, which it did, if you say, okay, in 10 days, American grocery stores are going to be stripped of everything in it, guys, you only get to do that once, and she'll never listen to you again. So, and I talk about that in the book, the credibility, the things I did. I would build it up with little teeny predictions that didn't seem like predictions. They seemed like offhand comments of things, and there's risk involved in this, things that I was pretty certain were going to happen. And you start off small. If women think that you're just trying to do this whole prepping thing because you want more guns, it's not going to work. I mean, if my wife doesn't knit, but I'm totally using stereotypes here, by the way, that are completely unfair. But if my wife really loved to knit and wanted to spend a lot of money on knitting, by the way, I don't even know that it's possible to spend a lot of money on knitting. But anyway, she really wanted to spend money on knitting and try to convince me that there were tarantulas flying around that were going to bite me and kill me and give me a painful death. And what we really needed to do was to knit full body suits to protect us from the flying poisonous tarantulas. I would sit there and go, wow, she, number one, is insane. And number two, that checker at Walmart's looking better every day. No, I'm kidding. And number one, she's insane. And number two, this is some kind of scam so she can buy stuff. And you need to think about that. The other thing that is often effective, and it didn't go well for me, to be very honest, so I've seen this work with other folks, is making the point, because it's a valid point, it's a very good point, that what you're trying to do here is make sure that the family, especially if kids are involved, this is an easier argument to make. You just want to make sure everybody has stuff and that stuff's going to be okay. Great example. I mean, we were joking about it, but it's the perfect example, the whole tampon thing. It is really considerate and kind to plan and include those kinds of things. Say, want everyone to be comfortable and taken care of. Another thing to do to persuade a reluctant spouse is to not spend a ton of money. There are two ways to go about this. One is the honest way, and the second way is the way I did it. So you can tell
secret
my wife's
stash in the car.
Yeah, exactly. So if you need to be upfront about it and want to be honest, which I highly recommend, by the way, it's not spending a ton of money. There are a million things you can do that are low cost. I mean, you start taking care of water. That's a huge thing that people often overlook. And low cost ways to prep have been covered on other episodes, and won't repeat those. But starting off inexpensively, and then again, the second way is the whole money laundering thing that I actually did. Not super recommended because they find out and then they're mad about that. So you cannot go into debt to do this. Just please don't do that. If you get hyped up and emotional and you go and you buy $10,000 worth of freeze-dried food or something like that, and God forbid you put it on a credit card, I'm not being funny or dramatic here. You in most marriages stand a pretty good chance of getting a divorce or something. And by the way, I have friends in that department. It costs a lot of money, so don't do it. It's a bad idea. So you got to just keep your head, and that's really hard to do because one of the things, I said I'm a regular guy and a lawyer and a lobbyist, and I have this front row seat to corruption. I see government. I observe government as part of my job. I know all kinds of elected officials and all kinds of appointed officials and government people and law enforcement and special operations, all these kind of people. And I get information, not the super secret stuff by any means, about what's going on and what they're planning for. And let me be super clear about this. It's not FEMA death camps they're planning for. I'm talking about planning for example, the law enforcement plan for what if semis quit rolling. The plan is, oh my God, there'll be about 2 hours of breaking windows at Walmart, and then we're all going to haul ass and go home and be with our families. That, that kind of thing. So I get this information from friends of mine who are trusted, and so I live in it. And my point is I understand the realism of what's going to happen and how it's going to go about and all of these things. It's not some theoretical thing on a internet forum. It is a guy whose job it is to plan for these things, saying, holy smokes, we are so done for if this happens or when it happens. Anyway, so I can get myself amped up pretty easily because of the information I have access to. And so it's even harder for me. I sit there and I marvel. It's in book 1 or 2. The waiting is the hardest part is the name of the chapter. Yes. That I stole from Tom Petty. Yes, I totally did. And I'm sure his people will be contacting me after they listen to the show. And it's that feeling of, is the frustration. And a lot of your listeners have had this. You guys have probably had this too. You sit there and you're frustrated that other people aren't clued in to this and what's going to happen and how they can take some really inexpensive steps right now to really have a huge impact in the future. So I guess what I'm saying is it's hard for me not to get amped up. And other people need to similarly not get amped up, because you're gonna blow all your credibility, and you only get one chance.
That is so true. And speaking about amped up, even I always find myself I have to put a Post-it note on my computer while I'm reading any survival fiction, because all of a sudden I find myself on Midway USA or SG Ammo or something like that. And I was joking with Jason while we were going through your books, and I sent him, I was like, I almost just bought this entire case of 30 caliber ammo cans. and I keep finding myself, and it was whenever I read zombie fiction, I'll find myself looking at new bug out bags and all this other stuff. And so you do have to be careful, and it's easy, especially when you're getting into preparedness, to be so excited and amped up about it that you just kind of vomit that excitement onto other people that aren't necessarily in it yet.
But we've been doing this for a while, and it still gets that way.
Yeah.
I mean, I purposely avoid trying to read any of the books because I see what happens to Aaron, and I'm the excitable one. It doesn't take me much, and I'm calling him up, and I'm like, "So can I shoot him now? Can I shoot him now? Can I shoot him now?"
Don't be like Aaron.
So I avoid reading those types of books because I get so amped up. And I started reading your series, and I was just like, "Oh man." I felt like a little crackhead almost. I was just like, all right, I need this. I need this. Okay. I mean, I'm really short on this. And I was like, okay, that'll run me about, $30,000. I was like, damn.
Well,
let me rethink this.
A funny story about that. The real Mark, who you may not have been introduced to, he's coming up in books 3 and 4 and throughout the series. Real guy, he's my neighbor out at the cabins, and cabin's a real place and all that. Anyway, he's a hilarious guy, and I drove up one time, and he always calls me Glen Tate, not my real name, which I find funny. And he goes, Glen Tate, and I go, yeah, he's this retired Marine sniper guy, totally good guy to have as a neighbor, by the way. And he said, I'm mad at you. He used some really colorful language, probably more colorful even than we should probably use on this show. And so I'm mad at you, and I go, what? And he goes, my wife read your books, and she spent $500 on ammunition, you asshole. Man, sorry, man. And then he had this big grin because he's been trying to get her into guns for like 30 years. So anyway, it was cool.
I will put it to you this way. I have 100% plans to go buy about 5 of your books, and I'm going to hand them out to family members.
Excellent. Thank you. That's a hugely, you make me happy. Seriously. That's what this is about.
You deliver it in such a friendly manner that it's easy for them to kind of get into it. They're already starting to approach me about guns. They're like, "Hey, we don't have any guns, and you're one of those weird gun guys, right? So you mind if we borrow you and go down to the gun store and kind of help me pick out a gun?" I'm just like, "Oh yeah,
yeah,
you're gonna get guns. Yeah, I've got more people to go shoot with. Yeah, I can buy ammo in bulk."
Yeah, or more toilet paper.
Yeah.
Which I always
tampons.
Exactly.
Tampons, yeah.
Which it's funny, even within the preparedness stuff. It's I always find it funny, and that same way where you're trying to make up for the deficit of people who aren't into preparedness. Sometimes I even find myself doing that for people who are in preparedness. I'm shouting at Jason, who has gotten a lot better about it. But one of our running jokes was that I'd always be like, Jason didn't buy enough ammo last month, so I'm going to get a little more for him, and I'm just going to have it for him. Or Jason doesn't have enough toilet paper, so you know what we need? Another pallet of toilet paper.
Yeah.
See, I'm the food guy in the team.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm a forager, and like I have off-grid cooking styles and the old ways of like food preparation and storage and stuff like that. Was on a reality TV show thing about it. That's my thing. Well, what I'm lacking in, Aaron completely compensates for. And that's our running joke. It's like, all right, he forgot this. He's going to forget this. He's going to forget this. But at least I'm going to eat good. And then
Yeah.
You'll keep Jennifer quiet with your cooking.
Hey, whatever I can bring to the table, man.
And definitely your shooting and tactical abilities.
I mean, even Price was joking. He was like, I'm so going to do a cooking scenario where you're having to like shoot targets and make dinner for us. And I was like, I'm in. I can so handle that.
So now,
sounds like fun.
To circle back to the spouse thing for a second, you had a really funny thing in your book I wanted to bring up. How does the Easter Bunny come into play in your series?
Oh, yes.
This is so amazing. And this is another example of I couldn't have possibly made this stuff up because only reality is like this. The reason the book series exists is the Easter Bunny. And every time I say that, a lot of podcast hosts are like, oh my goodness, we just booked a lunatic. This guy is just absolutely crazy. But no, it's real. What it is that here I am prepping in secret. Wife doesn't know. I kind of hinted at it and got a really bad reaction from her and, about me being crazy and stuff like that. And so it's pretty obvious that I can't just I sound like a total wimp in all this. And that's the other thing about these books. And one of the reasons I have a pen name is that, especially in the beginning of the books, you're like, this guy is, he needs to just man up, but can't do it for a variety of reasons, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so I have this rental storage locker thing. And that's where I'm putting all my preps because I can't have them at my house, right? Isn't this pathetic? If you don't think I sound pathetic, you're wrong because this was pathetic. I have to hide this stuff, and I had to come up with an explanation and this is a bug in scenario. This is before we had the cabin, so we didn't have a bug out possibility. Bug in situation. How am I going to explain after I go to the storage locker and bring all this stuff back? This mountain of food and these ammo cans and all these guns and medical supplies. And this is before I did all the tampons, so there would have been those too, right? But anyway, all this stuff, how am I going to explain this? And I thought, well, there's two paths. With my wife, telling her that I saw this coming, I'm right, you're wrong. You got to listen to me now. I told you so. Yeah, extremely ineffective on my wife, extremely ineffective on most wives, extremely ineffective on most human beings, right? Mm-hmm. Or there's a face-saving way. And as a guy who thinks about messaging and political stuff, I'm always thinking, face-saving ways. The face-saving way I came up with, and it just sprang into my head, was this is what I'd say to my wife. It would be the Easter Bunny speech. I'd say, honey, the Easter Bunny brought some stuff by. And here's what we're going to do, and then get into the practical stuff. Here, we're going to do neighborhood defense. Here's the food. Here's how we're going to do this. Here's how we're going to take care of the kids. The kids are going to be, it was just all that stuff. And then I realized in the Easter Bunny speech that I needed to give at least a little explanation of why I did all this stuff, right? I mean, she's super smart and she knows the Easter Bunny doesn't exist. I'd have to explain a little bit about why I did it. So the Easter Bunny speech was going to be a very, very important fork in the road of this marriage. And by the way, this would be happening at an extremely stressful time, right? This is a time when my wife could easily say, okay, this guy's lost his mind. All the ATMs are shut down. Maybe the power's off. I hear sirens. I hear shooting. I mean, all this stuff's going on. And she could say, okay, I'm done with you. You're crazy. You know what I mean? And I don't want that. And so I had to get it right. So I got a Post-it note out and I started making little points on it about why I prepped, what I did, and what we're going to do now that we've got this stuff. Because obviously, as you guys know, having stuff, is not the answer. It's what do you do with stuff and all of that other thing. So I started doing this Post-it note and it got all written over. And I said, well, I better put this on a sheet of paper. So I kept writing it and then I got on my computer and I'm super organized. I mean, I present information for a living, right? And it's like the bullet points got pretty long. And so pretty soon it was a couple pages long, an explanation of why to prep, what you did, and how to go about all this. And I thought, well, this would be a cool little short story. And then I laughed and I'm like, I don't know how to write fiction. So, I mean, how's this going to work? And so I turned it into a little teeny chapter, I guess is what I'd call it now, a little short story called The Easter Bunny Speech. And I thought, I'll put it up on Survival Podcast and say, hey, everybody, here you go. Here's the Easter Bunny Speech. Maybe this will help you present this information to a reluctant spouse or something like that. So I started working on it. And then I realized, well, I got to explain why I'm acting this way. Because if you don't know me and you don't know my background and you don't know this suburban situation I'm in, if you don't know about the stuff I do at work and the people I know and the information I have and all this other stuff, you're going to be like, why is this guy acting this way? Well, the other half of that is, why is my wife acting the way she's acting? Because unless you know about her background, kind of an upper middle class background where nothing bad ever happened, you wouldn't understand why she's this way. So I did and it turned into a chapter about me, turned into a chapter about her. And then I was sitting there going, wow, there's a lot of story here. And I realized that this is something, this reluctant spouse thing in particular, something that's confronting a whole lot of people. And again, I was going to put it up on a forum, and help some people out. And then I just started writing and writing and writing. And that's when, as I mentioned earlier, I realized all these amazing people I've met in my life were in book one. It's all true of stuff they've done. And then I projected out into the future about what they would do and how it would go. And then at this point, the cabin is around and I can talk about it and I can talk about my neighbors like Martin, like I was just mentioning, and all these things. And then it kept going and going. It took about 2.5 years. I'd get up at 3 a.m. and write until I went and worked out. I knew it, and I would get lost in this complete blizzard of thoughts and stuff. And I would sit down, and then all of a sudden, kind of my butt would get a little sore because I was sitting in this chair and I'd start getting hungry and stuff. And I'd look around and maybe the sun had come up. I was in a zone. It's super hard to explain. And if it's ever happened to you, it's a really cool and wonderful thing. And I just kept going and going and going, and poof, 10 books sprouted out. That's the Easter Bunny story.
Man, it's great stuff. Believe me, I've been writing down little bits and pieces of stuff. I'm like, I'm going to use that. Ooh, that's good. I'm going to use that. Oh yeah. I like that too.
That's awesome. One of the other things you deal with a lot is problems with normalcy bias.
Yeah.
And I think that is I don't think I've ever seen anybody really discuss it. And it is such an issue. And if there really was some sort of collapse or anything else, that would be a massive issue. What in writing and in everything else, did you ever come across any concepts as far as getting people quickly past? Or do you find that it's just that is what it is and you just have to let them come to the realization that things aren't okay on their own?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very situation dependent. People will, for the most part, have to see, hear, smell, touch things that make them realize that something isn't normal. Now, that, of course, is only half of it. If there's an event, let's say there's gunfire in the background or smoke rising up from a riot or something like that. Okay, that's only half of it. They look and they see the smoke column rising, and maybe they're still not thinking, maybe I need to not be anywhere near this. This thing can spread, all of that other stuff. So, as I say, first half is the situational dependent. The second half, of course, is the hard part, the human being part. And I think the best way to deal with that is back to this credibility thing. If you need to break someone out of normalcy bias, they need to believe that you've got some kind of plan, and that when you say, we're going to leave now, dear, that you don't say that all the time and that it means something. The other part of it is, and this is kind of anticlimactic, it's not a great answer, but it's what I think is reality, and that is it's kind of random. I mean, people have different levels of normalcy bias, and some of them you just may not be able to break them out of it. I think that'll be a minority of folks. And the classic example of that is in the book, one of the characters, and he's not an important character, he's just a guy that's mentioned while this writing's going on. He's in Powell's neighborhood. He's washing his 69 Mustang, and he's kind of muttering to himself about how much fun he used to have. They go out on drives, and he's just talking to himself while there are people literally shooting all around him. And he cannot deal with what's happening, and his only soothing comfort mechanism is to just focus on this car, probably to his death. And so And that's going to be unusual. That's kind of the worst case scenario. So it's going to be a combination of these things. Another thing that really helps with busting people out of normalcy bias is peer pressure, right? I mean, if let's say your wife is saying, I just can't believe that things are going bad. Everything always turns out okay. This is America. Nothing bad ever happens. And you and your neighbors and her best friend and maybe her sister and her brother-in-law are like, you need to leave. We're going. Do you want to come with us? So having peers around that she has respect for because there's credibility, like the sister and the brother-in-law thing. In this example, the sister and brother-in-law are not prepper wackos, right? They're just like, sisters and brother-in-laws. So maybe that helps. It's one of these things, I hate to say it, it's hard to stage, it's hard to manage how to bust somebody out of normalcy bias. There are things you can do that I mentioned. A lot of it's going to be situational. And now I'm going to go back to the reluctant spouse part of this because this is kind of what drives this. Because no offense, if some guy I don't know has normalcy bias, I'm sorry, I really don't care. But if my wife does and is about to get killed, I do care about that. And that is, I'm not trying to be Dr. Phil here, but it's true. Having the best possible relationship on every level with whoever it is you want to bust out of normalcy bias, in this case it'd be a reluctant spouse, is the best thing you can do. Because if your wife's mad at you, thinks you're a lunatic, spent too much money, and there's going to be a lot less receptive ears there. But if she's like, I love this man, I feel safe around him, my goodness, our family needs to be safe, boom, there goes your normalcy bias. Because something stronger than normalcy bias, her love and respect for you, has displaced the normalcy bias. So that's how I would approach it. So guys in particular, be fantastic husbands. Boyfriends, be fantastic boyfriends. And wives, be good wives. And girlfriends, be good girlfriends. And that is going to go a long way towards solving a lot of these problems. And it's fun.
This is true. It was funny. I've experienced in life one other situation with normalcy bias. And it was interesting as far as just being gentle with them, but also pointing out to them the importance of protecting family and protecting loved ones. I had a family member that was kind of jolted into preparedness, so to speak. And one of the things I noticed was while we were standing there talking through the issues, they kept asking the exact same question over and over and over in the exact same way, almost like they just couldn't process the answer they were being given. And I just had to gently stand there with them and keep explaining it to them, and then start talking about, well, in that situation, it's either that other person or it's your family. And that jolted them out of the question loop that I got caught into.
Yep. And little things too. I should have added this. Little comfort items can be a big deal. In the story, my mother-in-law, Eileen, is having trouble. I mean, she goes out to the cabin and thinks it's overreacting and all of that by her crazy, husband, who's not crazy at all. And there's tea. She really likes tea. She loves to have a cup of tea, which is a totally legitimate thing. There's tea out at the cabin. So it isn't so crazy to go out to the cabin because there's tea out there. And when you and I talk about it, it sounds kind of weird to say, you're kidding me. Somebody's going to save their own life because there's tea at a cabin? Well, that's great. No, it's not crazy. And so little things like that in book 7, there's there's Halloween candy for the kids to trick or treat with. They've had their lives are turned upside down and nothing's right. And they get a piece or 2 pieces of candy at Halloween, and there's a little Halloween party, and that is hugely soothing to them and to their parents. And politics kicking in, the parents are like, who is it that gave my kids Halloween candy? Oh, it's the Patriots. Those Patriots care about me and my family, and those Patriots are squared away and have stuff. I'm casting my lot with the Patriots. So anyway, you can see that little teeny things like that are a big, big deal.
Yeah, definitely. It's smart thinking. Now, and that brings up kind of the opposing questions. What mistakes would you say either the main character or any of the other characters that are the good guys in the story made that you think people could learn from?
In some ways, probably could have been a little bit tougher with some of the bad guys. And I struggled with this a lot. I didn't want to write something where it was killing a bunch of people, because huge believer in self-defense and all of that, and I think there will be violence in what's coming, but I I don't like violence, and especially, I've never killed anybody, thank goodness, but I mean, don't want to kill anybody. And I didn't want to glorify that. And also, I didn't think it'd be terribly realistic.
One other thing to kind of back up in the entire storyline, you mentioned Rebel Radio very early on in the series as a big political instigator. And I know so much of the books was based on real life. Does Rebel Radio, I can talk today, actually exist?
No, but remember I said 97% true. That's part of the 3%. It's something I'd love to do. I've always wanted to do it. So yes, it does not exist. It'd be cool if somebody wants to do it, they should do it.
Yeah, it was funny. Jason, as soon as he popped in the door this evening after we got done playing with his new baby girl, he was like, okay, does Rebel Radio exist? And I'm like, I don't know. I went and looked for it, but I didn't see it. I guess that was one of the things that wasn't there, or maybe it's under another name. So we were very excited to ask you about that today.
Well, Rebel Radio comes up in books 9 and 10 as some of the people throughout the state and throughout the country, really, that listen to Rebel Radio were inspired by it, and it all feeds back into the Grant character, which is me, and the Ben Trenton character, who's a real guy. So yeah, it was more than just like a cool thing I wanted to do. It ends up having meaning. That's one of the cool things I hope is cool about books 1 and 2 is all these little seeds that are planted, all these little things that are mentioned. Almost all of them end up sprouting up later on. I don't want to just like talk about myself. It's like, oh, it's childhood. What is this? Is this his diary? Am I reading this guy's diary? I mean, how boring is that? No. Everything in there matters later on. So yeah.
No, it's great, man. Because I believe me, I'm hooked. If I'm staying up until 4 o'clock in the morning, newborn baby in one hand and like headphones in the in my ears going doo. Sitting there listening. Come on, that should say enough. I mean, it's good stuff, man.
Thank you so much.
Now, speaking of a lot of things, you had, obviously it's a prepper book, so there's a collapse involved. Where did you? And I think we've already kind of hinted at this, but where did you draw on the inspiration for the collapse, and even beyond the collapse, the way the different pieces of the United States line up and fall apart and all that great stuff?
Yeah, I was actually calling you a prepper prophet. When I was reading this stuff, I'm like, man, this guy's good.
Well, before I answer that, and I do sound like a politician, right? What I just said. Before I answer that, I'm going to tell you something I want to say. No, I'm just kidding, but kind of true. By the way, I want to say chapter 34, when Texas is being overrun with illegal aliens, the governor of Texas says, if the federal government will not secure Texas borders, Texas will, which 3 years after I wrote that is exactly what Rick Perry said. So sorry to toot my own horn here, but there is some of that. Okay, so to answer your question, to be honest, I'm surprised that people think it's prophetic, and here's why. Because there are so many historical, real-life ways this is played out. Now, this played out in other places, and so I sort of apply it to America, so that part, is new. And to be honest, there are some other good prepper fiction books out there that kind of describe this scenario. But I looked at Russia in the 90s, the early 90s, and yeah, that was the main part, early 90s. They had another mini collapse in 98. I looked at Argentina in 2001. That was a big inspiration. And then I projected that, and a little bit of Katrina thrown in, a little bit of LA riots. And then again, all these people I know, right, that tell me that when they plan these things, they like have a war game scenario. They're like, okay, what happens if the power goes off? And they're like, oh goodness, oh geez, that's bad. Oh my God, that's bad. Oh my goodness, that's bad too. So I put all that stuff together and kind of projected it into America. And you guys are focused more on the collapse part, and that's cool. Later on in the series, there's a war and there's an insurgency. I hate that word. I love this country and I don't want bad things to happen. And so it is not easy for me to talk about an American insurgency. However, I'll make this point on the insurgency part. A friend of mine who's in the special operations community, and I'm not, by the way, total, civilian, never done anything cool guy. But anyway, a friend of mine in that community said that this series is the best description of an American insurgency he's ever come across. And I mean, his job is counterinsurgency, right? And so, but my point about that is that I took some principles that are universal to human beings. They want food, they want security. Sometimes they rally around bad people, all those kinds of things. And I just sort of applied it to America and this is what I came up with. So I don't know that there's it's not some divine inspiration that came out. Actually, not true. I think this entire book series was, listen, when a guy who doesn't write fiction sits down and writes 10 books and it's really, really popular, it's not Glen Tate that did this. But anyway, I don't mean to get heavy on anybody. So I can't really say how it all came about. Some of the details I got right. And to me, this is not surprising that this would turn out this way. It would be surprising if, and sounds terrible, I'm going to say it. It would be surprising if things don't turn out as I write about them. I know that sounds very arrogant, and I hope I don't come across that way, but I honestly, to me, it's a no-brainer.
Mm-hmm. No, and I think that's often the case. I mean, it's just like being in preparedness and looking at people that aren't in preparedness, and you're like, how am I crazy? You're the one that's not prepared for anything.
You not see this stuff?
Yeah. No, and I think that's great. I mean, it adds a lot of credence to the book series as far as not just a really great series of fiction, but also a tremendous amount of lessons that can be learned and looked at as a study of, well, what would a collapse of that nature look like, and how do things break down? And also not just that, I just pulled out this cool story out of my butt and here you go. It's also like, look, this is based on research and stuff like that. Because that was one of the things I got from the character, was the character's love of history, and looked it out. And I kind of figured that played a role in your life as well.
Absolutely.
I think that's it. I think that's a big important part of any prepper stuff is that there is credence, and that someone did do research and really looked at it to get their theories, instead of just, the zombies are rising tomorrow, which we do love our zombies. Well, I love zombies. Jason still thinks I'm an idiot for my affinity for zombies. But man, nothing will get me trying to buy a pallet of whatever, like a good zombie. But anyway, you have an interesting project going on with your series, which is the Cool Friends Project.
Yeah.
What is that?
Thank you for asking about that. That is such a neat thing. As I mentioned earlier, I didn't expect any of this to happen. I never expected to be on your podcast or other podcasts I've been on, and radio shows. And the audiobook, for example, if you don't mind me saying, was one of Audible's best of 2014. I mean, it was like awesome. Hillary Clinton's book was like in it too. And now I think this book is way better than her book, and I really like her and stuff like that. And I'm way better looking, by the way, than Hillary Clinton. But even to most men, that's frightening. But I mean, so this amazing stuff has happened. And one of the cool things about it is all these people out there that I used to listen to their podcasts. I used to buy their products before there was even a book or something like that. Classic example, SOE Tactical, John Willis at SOE Tactical, phenomenal guys. I mean, completely over-engineered, like SEALs buy it and stuff like that. And I mean, it's just great stuff. So I love his stuff. And then I do the books, and he gets a hold of me and he goes, love these books. Wow, is there anything I can do to help? And I can't remember how I came up with this idea. I go, hey, I got some bookmarks with the book name and stuff and the website. Could you like throw one in every order? He goes, yeah, that'd be cool. Now I send him about every 3 months. I send him 5,000 bookmarks, right? Wow. Because that's how many go out. So it's the Cool Friends Project. So there's a classic example, John at SOE Tactical, where I have a page on my website, and it's called the Cool Friends Project. And I've got a list of these companies and podcasts and other things. And it's this cool community. I mean, we have the best community out there. If John was going to be in Seattle and he called me up and he said, I'd love to come out to the cabin, I'd be like, here you go. I mean, here's a couple pounds of bacon, knock yourself out. I mean, that kind of stuff. So that's the Cool Friends Project. And it's this, I'm still in awe of all the amazing people that I've run across from doing this. So that's the Cool Friends Project. And I just wanted people out there to know about SOE Tactical. By the way, I don't make any money from SOE Tactical or anything. I mean, they're just cool guys. Mm-hmm. So I love that aspect of it, because there's so much commercialism out there that something like the Cool Friends Project is kind of how we all are. And I wanted to reflect that, and it's just worked out really well.
Oh, that's awesome, cool. Man. That's really cool. And you brought up the Audible thing, and a couple quick last few things, because I know Dr. Foxy wants to give you an exam. But you had a cool
haven't
thing
lived, by the way. So, no, I'm just kidding.
Luckily, this isn't a family show.
Yeah.
But now you had a thing in there about Audible, and I mean that's a pretty big thing for an author to get on Audible. What was your first reaction to that, man?
Oh my goodness. The entire audiobook experience has been mind-blowing. 211 narrators submitted an audition to narrate this book.
Wow.
This wasn't like an email saying I'm sort of interested. This was a 4-minute audition that people sent in, which was mind-blowing. Guy picked Kevin Pierce, New York Times best-selling narrator. He's fantastic. He did a couple books. Friend of mine, Mark Goodwin, has the American Collapse series, the 3-book series. That's fantastic. People should read it or listen to it. And so I kind of had 3 books worth of Kevin's auditions. This is going to sound weird, and I'm getting goosebumps even saying this, but I can't even believe this is true. If people don't believe me, that's cool. I don't care. But this is what it is with the audiobooks. Book 1 in particular is my life. As I said, 97% true. I've obviously lived my life, right? I know it pretty well. I wrote about my life, so I'm pretty immersed in it. I got more out of my own life listening to Kevin Pierce narrate book 1. There were things I figured out about myself, the way he reads it, and he's an absolute consummate professional. When you get more out of your own life from an audiobook than having lived it, that's saying something. Anyway, and Audible and their ACX exchange, which is kind of the monster.com job board for authors and narrators, has been a great experience. I'll tell you something that really pleasantly surprised me. I didn't know anything about Audible, and I assumed, they're a big corporation. They're probably a bunch of communists. They're in New York. I don't like them, all that other stuff, right? No, these guys have been fantastic. They have algorithms. They figure out stuff, and they put this in their fall newsletter before it was released, saying that this is one of their staff picks, that they're very excited about this series. And all those things like you might also like this book, people who bought this book also bought this one, and listing 299 days in it has been really, really helpful. So Audible is really good at what they do, and they've been an absolute joy to work with. And I wouldn't have changed a single aspect of the audiobook experience. And I love those audiobooks. I know I'm biased, but I'm telling you, I had high expectations for them, and they were wildly exceeded.
Man, that's good to hear, because I do know what dealing with traditional publishers is like, and it's usually a lot like, it's like sausage. You don't want to see how it's made. and so that's really cool to hear that you had such a great experience with that. You made a really interesting point about what you got out as far as your own life, going back and listening to it, but we'll save that for the next time you're on the show. And so that we can let you go get your exam. How do people get in touch with you, man? What's the best way for people to get in touch with you and stay in touch with you and find out all the new and exciting things you have in store for readers?
Yeah, thanks. I'm a big Facebook fan, and I put a lot of stuff up there probably every day, every other day, or a couple times a day, something new, like an interesting article, or I get all these great pictures from people, like from readers and stuff with picture of the book or something. I mean, one of my favorite ones is a Coast Guardsman, has a picture of the book, and he says it's the North Pole. He's on a ice cutter, and I believe him. I mean, I'm not going to say he's lying, but I mean, it's like 299 days at the North Pole. I mean, the real live North Pole, that kind of stuff. So there's all kinds of interesting things like that. And that's Facebook, 299 days, parentheses, the book is the Facebook page. The web page is 299days.com. Amazon, Kindle and paperback are there. And Amazon, you can get the audiobooks, or you can get them from Audible. And then there's WhisperSync, which is cool, which is if you've already got the Kindle version, for about, I think it's $1.99, you can upgrade your Kindle to the audiobook version, so you can have both. Those are the best ways. And then there's contact information on the website, 299days.com. But to answer your question directly, as politicians rarely do, it would be the Facebook page is the best way to keep up on what's going on out there.
Very cool, man.
Gotcha.
Well, we sure appreciate you coming on today, and we look forward to having you on again sometime in the near future.
No, it's a blast. And by the way, our conversation before we started recording was a hoot. That was funny stuff. So we should just call and talk. I sound like a girl, don't I? Right?
We should do lunch.
Yeah. Get our nails done.
I'm not even going to get started. Not on the air. I'm just not going to go there.
Well, yeah, definitely, man. It was fun. We'll definitely hang out off the air as much as we can, and have you back on again soon.
Definitely. Let us know when Dr. Foxy's book comes out.
Tales from Dr. Foxy.
Oh, you're Yo, behave.
All right, man. Well, thanks for coming on today.
Thanks, guys. It was a blast.
With that, we wrap up episode 122. Thank you for joining us today. And be sure to check out the site for links to Glen Tate's books and all the other things mentioned in today's show at www.intherabbithole.com. From Houston, Texas. Till next time, stay safe and sound.